What's up everybody, Jameson Redding here with the Road Trip Angler, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing the PWR 129 from Bonafide Kayaks. To start with, Bonafide has been around for a while, and they started out as a fishing kayak manufacturer. Their very first kayak to ever come out was a fishing kayak focused on all the features that anglers are looking for in a fishing kayak. In fact, it was founded by Luther Cyphers, who also founded YakAttack, and for those that are in the kayak fishing world, you know YakAttack is the maker of tons of different accessories that make our life easier when we're out fishing. Since then, Bonafide has been picked up by a company called Big Adventures, and Big Adventures also owns Native Watercraft and Hurricane Kayaks, as well as some other recreational brands. But their primary focus with Native is pedal drive, and their primary focus with Bonafide has been paddle kayaks really up until this point. Now, there are pedal drive versions. Bonafide has a pedal drive version is what I'm trying to say. But this boat is really unique in the space, and really actually unique in kayak fishing in general. And the reason being is because it was designed from the ground up to be a motorized kayak. Before I jump in to the specs and the full review of this boat, I just want to give a shout out to Bonafide. They did give me this boat and allow me to do this review. I reached out to them and asked them if I could have access to it, because when this boat came out, I was really impressed by the features and the specs and how well this thing was thought out. So I was super pumped to try it out, and I just want to thank them for allowing me to try this boat out and put it through the test. The PWR 129 comes in at 12 feet 9 inches long, hence the 129 part. It's 35 inches wide and about 16 inches deep. I think it's interesting that they actually list the depth on their website, which is key, especially if you're thinking about where this boat's gonna fit, where it's gonna store, and how you're gonna haul it. It's kind of nice to know the overall depth of the boat. Also, it has a capacity of 500 pounds, which is huge. Bonafide lists the fitted whole weight at 78 pounds and the fitted rigged weight at 102 pounds. Now, what I'm assuming the fitted rigged weight would be is if you have the seat, the tray, really everything that can be attached to the boat, that would give you that 102 pounds. And the whole weight would be like with the tracks attached to it, but probably not the seat and some of the other things that are easily removable. I will note that Bonafide does list how they determine their capacity, which I think is pretty cool. And as I mentioned, that capacity is at 500 pounds. On their website, they say capacity is determined by taking kayak weight, paddler weight, and gear weight and adding those together. Bonafide determines capacity by where the performance of the kayak becomes very diminished. So if you get to that 500 pound mark, that's the kayak weight, the paddler weight, and the weight of the gear combined, the performance of the boat is going to be diminished enough to where you're going to notice it pretty significantly, according to Bonafide. Now, it'll be interesting to see how it does with all the weight that I'm going to put on it. In addition to those specs, the boat comes in with an MSRP at $1,999, which sounds a little steep for just a paddle kayak. However, with all the ability that you have to rig this boat, but you're not gonna have to buy a lot of aftermarket parts other than those electronics to rig it. It's already got the track installed throughout the boat. You've got high-low seat adjustability, easy areas to mount motor mounts and whatnot on the back without having to buy accessories. And it comes with a rudder, which is going to be a $200 to $300 option on most other kayaks. So if you are paddling this kayak, it is really nice that you have that rudder built in, and it comes standard on the boat, which means that the steering tubes and the steering cables are already there to integrate that motor. So let's jump into all those features, and we'll start at the bow and we'll work our way back. Then we're gonna rig out the boat and paddle the boat, and we'll go over what I think about all those things. You've got a nice handle. It is not a molded in handle, which I actually kind of like. It's attached to the front of the boat, so if you do ever break that, you could easily replace it, but it feels nice and sturdy. You've also got these channels here on the front of the boat, so if you do take water or waves over the top, it's gonna funnel and channel that water back so that it drains out really nicely. You've got this rubberized paddle scoop or paddle staging thing here, which I've actually already tested out while I was paddling the boat. It's nice to have that on the front of a boat to be able to quickly stow that paddle when you want to make some cast and you don't want to put the paddle on the side. On the bow also, there are 2 inserts right off the bat here, which adapt to a plate that Bonafide sells as an accessory that allows you to mount that bow mounted trolling motor. Now I have that plate, however, I haven't installed it yet, and I don't actually have a bow mount yet to test out, but I will be doing that shortly. You're going to also see these throughout the boat. These are rigging plates that give you access to the inside of the boat, but also allow you to drill and rig your pass-throughs for your electronics on a plate that can be replaced. You can actually purchase other plates from Bonafide, replace those if you mess something up, or if you're changing out the rigging and how you want it to be. It comes solid, but if you pull this cover off, you have access to the inside of the boat. So even if you're not using this to drill through, it could be helpful when you're trying to pull wires through the boat and be able to utilize that access point. Also, if you're rigging that front or that bow mount trolling motor, that's going to be a great place to rig up a plug so that you can plug that in quickly. What I also liked is that those are screwed into inserts, so they're not drilled through the boat. You don't have to worry about a nut on the back side. That's going to be nice and sealed in case you take water over the bow. On either side here, we've got some rod tubes or rod tip protectors that run inside the boat and down the sides of the boat. One of the really cool things on the Bonafide kayaks that I've always been a fan of is the way that they hinge their hatches. It is a latch/hinge, so you can actually utilize it to open the lids either way. So I can open this from the bow, or I can open it from the cockpit on these hinge latch hinges, I don't know what you want to call them, but it's a really cool, innovative feature. Bonafide has had it on their kayaks since day one, and I've always liked it. You can also open these all the way up and actually lift the hatch lid off if you want to take it completely off the boat, which is just, I think, a really cool feature and gives you the ability to open it from either side, whether you're out of the kayak or in the kayak. It's got this rod staging area here, which also is kind of like a handle to be able to open. There's some geometry as well to be able to hold your measuring device so that you can keep it out of the way and have it conveniently located if you need to grab it quickly and measure that fish. There's a bungee to retain that, and it also integrates with this Bullwinkle style. YakAttack used to have a product called the Bullwinkle that allowed you to stage your rods out. It's just going to give you some nice little keyed areas to have those rods laid out in front, keep those baits from getting tangled, but they're ready and staged to go there. This boat is designed from the ground up to take electronics. So you're going to notice throughout that there are places to put batteries, there's places to store electronics, and there's places to run that wiring. One of the things I did notice about this hatch is the gasket that goes around, a pill and stick foam gasket, which is pretty typical, but it's been very hot here at the house in the mid 90s. This boat has been sitting on my trailer in the sun, and I've noticed that this adhesive has started to break down, and this sealer or sealant that runs around the hatch lid has started coming off. Now, I don't think that's a big deal. I think I could go in and replace it with a little heavier duty 3M product that would stick maybe to the hatch rim or to the hatch lid itself and fix that. But I don't think it's even gonna be that big of a deal unless I actually flip the kayak, because you have a nice tall rim around this hatch, which means that when water comes over, it would have to climb up and over this rim to be able to get inside the boat. And it's got a nice cutout area around it with drain ports to get that water away from it if you do take that wave over the bow. So I would like to see a little more robust seal there that maybe wouldn't get hot and come loose in the summer, but it's been really hot, and I'll be honest, I don't know if anything would hold up that well in these conditions because it needs to rain and needs to cool off. I'm tired of the summer. We're gonna move on back to, I guess, the start of what I call the cockpit area of the boat. They do make an accessory that gives you a dashboard here. I actually have the Boondocks version of that, which gives you a landing spot here for electronics. It's really nice to be able to put those in the center of the boat, so even if you are paddling and not motorizing, you can keep the sides of the boat or the gunnels of the boat a lot cleaner. You have track on either side, which is nice, again, for mounting anything you want to mount. It is aluminum track, which makes it really sturdy, and I just like the fact that it's aluminum. I think it's a little bit higher tier, if you will, and you're getting that value. If you're gonna pay $2,000 for a kayak, it should have aluminum track on it. This is something that is unique to Bonafide, and it is a gear pod. You can take it all the way out of the boat. So if you do rig your electronics with your battery in here to run a fish finder, you could actually pull this whole pod out of the boat and stow it in the vehicle so that you don't have to worry about theft. Get this back in. It also hinges, so if you need to just like clear something out of the boat or use the restroom, you got a spot to do it, or check your transducer. You can open this up and have storage. If you don't want to run electronics on it, you've got the ability to store stuff in there and have it quick and easy to access. So that is just a pretty cool feature. I mentioned earlier that this boat comes with a rudder already pre-installed, so you do have those rudder lines already there. It's Spectra cord, which is what I love to use when I'm rigging up motors on different kayaks. I use this same exact style cord. It doesn't stretch. It's very, very durable and very strong. In fact, I've never actually broken any of it. And Bonafide uses this really cool way to adjust for different leg lengths. And whether you have the seat high or low, you simply pull these out, twist them, and take up more of the cord. And that's gonna shrink the pull or the amount of space that you have here in those foot pegs. And you can also do that to loosen it. In the floor, tons of scupper holes. You've got 6 in this cockpit area. Obviously, it's gonna help the water get out of the boat if you do take a wave over the side or over the bow, but it's also gonna add structure to the hull. So when you're standing on it, there's gonna be no flex whatsoever. And I've already tested that out, and I can vouch for the fact that the hull is very rigid. You have nice cutouts for water to be able to drain and get to those scuppers as well. And you have this track that runs along the center of the floor that allows for this seat tray that's underneath to be able to slide forward, so you have access to some gear underneath the boat. But I want to talk about this seat. Seat goes high and low. It does not adjust forward and aft, which I think maybe is okay, but I haven't really tried it out. One of the nice things about adjusting it forward and aft is that you can really center that weight on the boat where you need it and distribute it, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of rigging. However, this boat was designed for motorization from the start. So when we get back into the tank oil area, I'm actually going to talk about that a bit, because it does matter where the seat is in relation to the length of the boat and how much volume you have on the stern if you're going to be putting that extra weight of a motor and the power on the stern of a boat. And with the quick turn of 2 knobs, you can actually take that seat completely out. There's a bungee that can retain the back side. I don't have it attached right now. And you can simply fold this down and go into that low position and then lock it back into place. To go back into the high and pop it back into place. And it's kind of cool too, with this locked in, you can actually just kind of lift the seat and let it fold forward if you need to just put some gear in when you're rigging at the boat ramp. You've got 2 nice handles that also work as a paddle staging area. So the handle is going to catch along with the molded in indent on either side, so that you can strap that paddle to the side with a bungee. You've got this keyed in spot on either side of the seat as well, with a molded in insert so that you can add that lock and load base from YakAttack. So it kind of eliminates having to put a track there, but if you get the right threaded screw for that, you'll be able to just thread right into that insert, and it's keyed, so it's going to lock that base into place. That's going to be a great spot to put that throttle mount for whatever motor you're putting on the stern of the boat. Under the seat back here, you'll see that there's another plate here. This is an ideal spot if you're gonna have a battery right in your tank well, to be able to jump those wires inside and come out for, say, a bow mount trolling motor. That way you can offset that weight, or to jump inside and then come back out to the motor so your cables are not having to lay on top of the boat. You have another plate on the side here, and you could add another one here. So right now, the way this is molded is it's not symmetrical. You actually have that spot for that vertical tackle box on the right hand side or starboard side of the boat. And on the port side of the boat, you have that access plate, which is great if you're adding things like that forward-facing sonar. Now, I don't have any experience with that yet. I do plan to start playing with a bit, and I think if you're gonna pop out right there and have some cables, or if you just want your graph a lot closer to you, or again, if you're mounting that throttle and you wanna run those cables inside the boat instead of on top of the boat, that might be an ideal place to be able to rig and run that so that it's nice and clean. You see this bungee back here as well. Again, that's to go over the seat frame and to secure it in place. There's also a bar here to hook it to. I also think you'd be able to use that area to secure a battery in this slot. It's already pre-shaped for, say, a 27 group battery. 100 amp hour, 135 amp hour battery is gonna fit in there very nicely. As we jump back into the tank well, you'll see that it is super giant, and I actually really love that about it. I like the 16 by 16 inch black pack, mostly because it allows me to take way more gear than I need to take. Also because I can put more rod holders on it. But this is typically where my Torqeedo battery or whatever battery that I'm bringing along to power either the bow mount or stern mount motor is gonna live. Unless I can get enough cable to put it up front, it's gonna be back here as well. And with people taking more and more gear and bigger batteries, you need a large tank well. Part of the reason that you're able to have such a large tank well is because they did a very good job of adding volume to the stern of the boat. It carries the width of the kayak throughout. The stern, which is going to do a couple of things, give you more room to put stuff, but also keep the boat from squatting as much once you put that motor, those power poles, and all that gear in the tank well. The seating position is also a bit more forward than what you would typically see in a kayak, and again, that is because they were thinking about motorization. It allows the weight to be distributed better through the boat, and it should perform better. We're gonna jump into how it performs both with the motor and by paddling in a minute. But right now, I just wanted to talk about the features in this tank well. You've got track on both sides. The bungee is adjustable. It comes with these clips from YakAttack that integrate really nicely with the YakAttack black pack, so you can strap things down without having to add extra bungees there, which is nice. Now if I can just get it to go back the way they had it. I didn't talk about this earlier, but you have traction pad throughout the boat, so all in the standing area and then in key places back here, so that your stuff doesn't slide around when you set it in the boat. You also have another rigging plate. You've got some more track in addition to the track that's on both sides that the bungee's mounted to. You have two more short pieces of track back here. I like to run a camera off the stern, so that's gonna make that easy. Other things like carbon flags can be mounted back here very simply and very easy. You'll see that you have this disc. This is for the rudder. As I mentioned, this comes standard, so that also gives you the tube steering for that rudder, but if you want to disconnect the rudder and connect it to a motor, you can do so. You could probably come up with a way to rig this so that you keep your rudder controls and have steering for whatever motor you want to put on the stern, but I'm going to tap into this because it saves me from having to drill and run tubing throughout the boat, and I most likely will put a motor on this and leave it on there, so I really won't need this rudder once I have this motorized. But I think it's a great option to be able to have it, and it really just maximizes the things that you can do with this boat, especially if you're going to put a bow mount instead of a stern mount motor on this. Bow mount motor, you may still want that rudder, because a lot of times what happens with the bow mount is the back end will want to kick around or walk around on you when you're trying to go straight. So being able to drop that rudder and keep it straight, but also have the ability to steer from the stern or while you're seated and not have to use your hand for a bow mount motor, that's going to be a great option. I'm probably going to go with a stern mount for now, we'll see, but having the ability to take this off and put it back on if I change my mind and utilize those tubes that are already in there, I think is going to be awesome. As we finish up the stern back here, there are inserts everywhere. You have 4 sets of inserts on the stern on both sides. So on the starboard side and the port side, you've got 4 sets of inserts. Those are specifically placed so that you can purchase an accessory from Bonafide to be able to put a power pole or have that power pole footprint, that 4 bolt hole pattern to line up. The reason they did it for an accessory is my understanding that's going to give you a lot more strength back here by sandwiching those two things together, mounting the plate to the boat, and then mounting either the power pole or whatever else you might want to mount to that plate. So I'm actually going to run dual power poles on this. It'll be the first time I've ever tried that. I've always wanted to try that. I've only done it ever on one other boat that I know of, which was the Blue Sky Boatworks Angler 360. I had twin power poles on the back of that for a while, and that was pretty cool. So I'm excited to do that. I've already got my Torqeedo plate, so right out of the gate, I'm gonna be testing this with my Torqeedo 1103. You've got that 4-bolt hole pattern, so you don't need any adapters, which is awesome. One thing I didn't mention that I forgot to mention is that you've got some little divots or detents in the plastic on these 2 flat spaces back here. The reason they did that is so that if you want to add flush mount rod holders, you know exactly where to drill. You can get that hole saw bit and you can drill those out and put your flush mount rod holders there. The reason they didn't include flush mount rod holders is because a lot of anglers would rather have a piece of gear track here, or would rather not have them at all because they do tend to take water in when it rains and whatnot. But if you want to add those flush mounts, easy to do. You already know where to drill those holes. Pretty easy to figure that part out. That pretty much covers the specs and the features of the boat and my first impressions of those, but let's go to the water, let's paddle the boat, and then I'm gonna rig it out with a full set of electronics. We're gonna put a fish finder on it, a couple of power poles on the stern, and a Torqeedo. Then we're gonna take it back to the water with a full load, and we're gonna see how it performs in both scenarios, and then go through my final thoughts on the boat and who I think it's for. First thing I want to talk about is stability. Bonafide is known for their stability, and this boat is no different. The modified kind of catamaran hull that it has on the bottom is really going to lock the boat into the water. Right off the bat, you're going to feel super stable. And I think even with this high seat, which by the way, to me is probably the highest seat position I've ever been in a kayak, I still felt really stable. And I was worried that I wouldn't, that I would feel top heavy. I just didn't. And it also made it easier to get up and down, so I felt more stable when I was getting up and down. I don't know if I was in really rough water, if I would want to be in that high seat position. So that'll be something that I'll have to test when I meet those conditions, because we had pretty calm conditions out there on the lake when I was testing this boat. But overall, I'm very impressed with the stability, both when it was completely unloaded and when it had a full tournament load or a fully rigged out load on the boat. In fact, I would almost venture to say that the boat felt a little more rock solid stable once I had some weight in the stern, because I didn't have all that weight in the bow, you know, more forward. Having that extra weight back here, because it has that volume and that larger tank wheel, I think actually made the boat more stable by locking that hull down into the water. So overall, super stable, very happy with the stability. It feels very stable. I mean, I can go pretty far on my hip before I don't even feel like it's gonna turn over. But yeah, this is a high seat. I mean, I'm almost setting, you know, my legs almost at a exact 90 degree here. That's how high it is. I want to jump into speed next. Now, this is not a touring kayak. It's a sit on top. It's 35 inches wide. It paddled about where I expected it to. It took not a lot of effort to get it up and going, and it had pretty decent glide on the water. It's not something that if I was only ever going to paddle, it's probably not the boat that I would choose. I would look for a boat that was a little bit more narrow and a little bit longer, maybe in that 13 to 13 and a half foot range if I was paddling open water. If I was paddling a river, I'd want a boat a little bit shorter that was more nimble, something like their RVR or the Jackson Coosa. You know, it just depends on what you're wanting to do with it, but I think the speed was decent and it paddled pretty well. It actually paddled probably a little bit better than I expected it to. I didn't think that it walked around on me at all in the stern. It glided pretty well. And I'll say also the addition of including the rudder in the kayak really helped. It's gonna keep that boat locked in place while you're making those paddle strokes. Also help you when you have a crosswind or cross current and you're trying to cross it. So having that rudder really locked the boat in, allowed it to track straighter and paddle a bit better. Now, going over to the motorization side of things, I have used a Torqeedo 1103 on a lot of different kayaks, and I kind of have a baseline of what is a fast kayak and what is a slow kayak when it comes to motorization. I would put this boat in the upper half, if not a little bit more like the upper two-thirds of the boats that I have tested. Most of the time, fully rigged out, the fastest speeds I'm seeing outside of an inflatable kayak is going to be somewhere around 6.5 miles per hour. This boat, I was able to do 6 miles per hour. However, I will say that I was in the high position and it was a bit windy out there, so I do feel like I was getting a little bit of wind resistance being up higher. Also, I have never put twin power poles on the back of the boat, and most of the time when I've tested other motors, I haven't had as much weight in the boat. I didn't carry as much tackle when I was testing for speed. I definitely didn't have 2 power poles, not even 1 power pole most of the time. So I feel like 6 miles an hour is actually pretty commendable, and it's probably up there pretty close with some of the faster boats that are out there on the market. Being that it's designed from the ground up to be powered, that is great. And also, I think part of the reason that you're seeing speeds like that is because the boat is 12 feet 9 inches long. The longer that boat gets, the faster it's gonna be, and also the more weight you can get forward in the boat, the faster it's typically gonna be because it doesn't squat as much in the back end. They did a good job with balancing that spacing out. You can't slide the seat forward and aft. So you just have to be happy with that location. And I think they did a good job of trying to balance that location. I have not tried it with a bow mount motor yet, but the extra added volume that you have in the stern, the fact that the width is carried through the stern, and the fact that the seat is already a little bit more forward than your typical paddle kayak really help offset the weight in the stern of the boat, and I had no water coming in the tank wheel. So speed, I'm gonna say, is pretty impressive on this boat. Like I said, I got 6 miles an hour with the Torqeedo 1103. If you can get anywhere over 6 miles an hour with a fully decked out, fully loaded kayak, that is moving. And so I think that they did a pretty good job with the speed, both from a paddling standpoint and from a motorization standpoint. The next thing I want to jump into is maneuverability. The boat actually maneuvers quite well for a 12 foot 9 inch long boat. And that, I think, is due to the fact that you do have that rudder, so you can help narrow that turning radius quite a bit by utilizing that rudder, but also the boat has a little bit of rocker. And what I mean by that is if you set the boat flat on the ground and you looked underneath it, you'll notice that the bow of the boat is a little bit off the ground, and so is the stern. That's gonna help the boat turn better than it would if it was completely flat on the bottom and you had that length touching the water throughout. It just allows the boat to turn a little bit easier, but it also allows the boat to handle a little bit rougher water. Now, I haven't had the opportunity to take it in super rough water yet, but I really think by looking at the shape of the bow and the shape of the hull itself, that it's gonna handle that water pretty well. So, turning the boat with that rudder engaged especially, you can maneuver it pretty easily with just one quick sweeping stroke from the bow to the stern or vice versa. You're gonna turn that boat about 180 degrees. Without that rudder engaged, it's gonna take a little bit more effort to turn the boat, but it does pretty good. Now with the motor, it actually turns within its own circle. So with that Torqeedo, I have removed the little stops on the Torqeedo. I'm not saying that you should do that, but it allows me to get that motor completely almost perpendicular or 90 degrees to the boat, which allows me to turn just about any length boat within its own circle, and this boat was no different. I'm able to keep that turning radius as tight as I want, especially if I slow down that Torqeedo and I just want to spin the boat. So it maneuvers quite well, even though it is a 12 foot 9 inch long boat, which these days is a little bit on the longer side for most people. I actually love the fact that this boat is over 12 feet long though. Now let's talk about comfort. This might be, dare I say it, the most comfortable seat in a kayak that I have been in, period. It is really well shaped. The padding is nice. You've got lumbar where it's supposed to be. I haven't spent 8-9 hours in it yet, so time will tell if I still feel that way. But I think a lot of the reason that it is so comfortable is because it's so high off the boat. At first, again, it did make me feel a little weird. I felt way up there. It's the highest seat position outside of a Blue Sky that has a pedestal seat that I've ever really been in a kayak. It's a big boat. It's a wide boat, stable boat. I'm in a very high seat position, so I've already lengthened my paddle out. When I'm in the high seat like this, I tend to be a pretty high angle, so this feels pretty comfortable. And even in the low position, you're still pretty decently high off the boat, but when you're in the high position, you're up there, which is actually keeping your legs almost 90 degrees when you're sitting down. So it makes it really easy to get up and sit down, which actually adds to the comfort, in my opinion. So I'm really impressed with this seat. Bonafide, good job on the seat, very, very comfortable. Also, while I'm standing, which I think is a big deal when it comes to moving around and having that padding underneath my feet, plenty of room, plenty of space to stand. Felt very comfortable standing, moving around the boat, which speaks to the stability of it as well. Very good job on the seat, Bonafide. I am very impressed with this. probably one of the most important things, and actually I would say the next three things I'm going to talk about are very important. Number one is fishability. You wouldn't buy this kayak unless you were planning to fish from it. This is a fishing kayak. It is very fishy. They did a really good job of laying out all the different track, laying out all the different rigging options, making it easy to add the things that you want to add as an angler, be able to stage your rods out in front of you, stow your rods if you need to, put those rod tips in to protect them. The track is where it should be. You don't really have to think about whether you need to add track or drill into the boat unless you're going to be running those electronics. And speaking of those electronics, they have given you those plates, those sacrificial plates throughout the boat in key areas that make really good sense for you to be able to add those electronics and not be worried about drilling an unrepairable hole in the side of your boat, because you can just replace that plate. So that is really nice, and I think it adds to the fishability. Also, the fact that I can run not one, but 2 power poles on the back of this thing is absolutely crazy. You might wonder why that's important. Well, you see it on bass boats all the time. When you want to power pole down and lock that boat into place, what happens when you only have one is that the boat can spin depending on which way the wind's blowing or the current. You're going to face down current, downwind, which might not always be the direction you want to face to fish. Having 2 power poles on the back, however, will lock that boat in and keep it facing the direction that you want it to be facing. Being able to do that and put a motor on the stern is impressive. Not many kayaks have enough room back there without going with a bunch of aftermarket accessories to make that happen. And then that also would make the motor stand off further if you have the power pole in line with the motor. Being able to do this pretty much stock. The only thing I had to get extra were those 2 adapter plates that Bonafide makes to allow me to add those 2 power poles. Very, very fishy when it comes to having places for your tackle, your electronics. You've got the storage bin under the seat, giant take well that you could take all your batteries plus all of your tackle. A lot of room up front to stand and move around in. The seat's comfortable. I can't wait to catch a bunch of fish out of this boat and really put it through the paces. Completely stable to stand in. I have a ton of gear. Full load of tackle. It's impressive. Make another cast, and then I want to check out these rod tip protectors, these little rod tubes. I kind of touched on this in the fishing category or fishability category, but I want to talk about rigging. Well, this boat was designed to be rigged. I mean, from the ground up, it has plates for you to be able to run those electronics through the hole. It has gear track everywhere. It's got inserts on the stern for a stern mount motor. It's got inserts on the bow for a bow mount motor. It has inserts on either side of the stern if you want to add those power poles. It is designed to be rigged. That's the whole point of this kayak. So it is one of the easiest boats that I've ever actually rigged anything on, to be honest with you. Other than having to add some link to those cables that were working the rudder to make sure they would reach my Torqeedo, I really didn't have to do a whole lot of rigging. And the only time I drilled into the boat, I went through their sacrificial plate there, electronics plate, whatever you want to call it, that cover. I was able to use that and run my wiring into the hull of the boat for that Lowrance unit. So overall, it is very riggable. Now I want to talk value really fast, and this is something that I think is super important. In this day and time, $19.99 might sound like a lot for a paddle kayak, because essentially that is what you are getting when you buy the PWR, is a paddle kayak. It doesn't have a pedal drive system. Doesn't come with a motor. It's a paddle kayak. However, that being said, it comes so ready to be able to add those electronics and those motors that I really do think the value is there. For example, in that paddle kayak, you're getting a rudder system. Well, typical rudder systems cost anywhere from $250 to $300 and more. It also has a very nice, comfortable seat. And again, I said track everywhere. The value is just there. I think it is totally worth $1,999. The only con I would say in the whole thing, and I really don't know if this is a con, but when I'm in a low position and I'm trying to use those foot controls for the rudder or for the motor, I just didn't feel like I had enough leg space because my legs are straighter out. I was having to keep my legs bent pretty bad in order to have enough room to throw the motor or the rudder back and forth on those foot controls. In the high position, no issue whatsoever, felt perfectly fine and perfectly comfortable. And for reference, I'm 6 feet tall and have about a 33-inch inseam. For me in the low position, I just didn't feel like I had enough room to throw my legs back and forth comfortably and get that rudder to work the way it needs to be. I could do it, I just had to have my knees bent a little more than I wanted to. That is really the only con I have in the boat. One of the things I always like to do is talk about who I think the boat is for. Well, I think it's pretty obvious. This boat is for the kayak angler that really wants to go crazy when it comes to rigging their boat. You're looking to put a motor on it, whether it be a bow mount or a stern mount. You're looking to put electronics on the boat in different places. You're looking to really take a lot of gear and a lot of tackle. That's who this boat is designed for. If you're someone that is just wanting to paddle and wanting a simple, lightweight boat to get out on the water with, or maybe you're someone that's going down a river that's smaller, you need a more nimble boat, you're not going to be motorizing, you're not going to be putting a bunch of electronics on it, this isn't the boat for you. You should look at potentially the RVR or the Kusa from Jackson or a paddle kayak that is going to be a little lighter and a little less, going on. But if you're someone that's looking to add those graphs, you want to add a power pole or two, you want to add a motor on the stern of the bow, I think this is the best option on the market right now for rigging all those things onto a kayak. Good job Bonafide on that. They didn't pay me for this video, but I am just really impressed with how well they hit the target of answering to all the things that anglers are doing these days when it comes to putting things on their kayak. Hopefully this video will help you make better decision if you're looking at the PWR, and you'll know if it's the right boat for you. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and as always, thanks for watching.